My name is Jackson McNeil, and for this assignment, I chose to do my presentation on the Minuteman National Historical Park. Today, this site consists of over 900 acres of land which wind along the original segments of the Battle Road, commemorating certain events that took place on April 19th, 1775. First, I want to discuss the Whitmore House, which was one of the 11 witness houses that existed in April 19th of 1775. This was the home of Jacob and Elizabeth Whitmore, as well as their daughter Sarah, her husband Moses Reed, and their 3 children. Neither Jacob or Moses fought with the Lexington militia, but Jacob and Moses had trained and would occasionally volunteer for the other Revolutionary War campaigns. Next is the Paul Revere capture site. It was here where a British patrol ended the rides of Paul Revere and William Dawes. The next site is the Miriam House. British soldiers passed peacefully by this house in the morning of April 19th, but were later attacked here in that same afternoon. Nathan and Abigail lived in one part of the house with their 7 children, and then in the other part of the house lived Josiah and his wife Lydia with their 10 children. When the alarm was given in Concord that the British soldiers were coming, Josiah and his sons went to the village and were among the forces that gathered at the North Bridge. And then the Wayside. Here at the Wayside, this was home to 3 literary families, the Alcotts, the Hawthorns, and the Lothrops. This was also the first literary site added to the National Park Service. The next site is the North Bridge. It was here that the first true battle of the American Revolution was fought, and it was also where the shot heard round the world was fired. On April 19th, 1775, colonial militia and Minutemen engaged the British at the North Bridge during the first forcible resistance against the British. This was the day that marked the beginning of the American Revolution. And then lastly, the Barrett House. The Barrett House is where Colonel James Barrett and his family lived. Colonel Barrett, he played a significant role in the first battle of the American Revolutionary War. He was tasked to secure much of the colony's military supplies. Then on April 19th, British troops marched to his house in search of those arms and supplies. Fortunately for them, the Barrett family and other colonists removed all those supplies from that house and safely relocated them to Groton, Massachusetts. For my next section, I want to talk about the historical context of the sites. From the years of 1765 to 1770, Britain began to tax American colonies to pay for the French and Indian War. This led to colonials protesting against the British because they believed that they had no right to tax them. Consequently, tensions built between the British and the colonials in Boston. Eventually, the British soldiers would fire into a mob, and they killed some men. And they killed 5 colonists. This was known as the Boston Massacre. Then, from 1773 to 1774. Britain repealed most of their taxes except for the taxes on tea. The rebels responded with the Boston Tea Party and would later dump tea into the harbor. Britain would then, as a response, close down the port and then strip Massachusetts of their self-government. The Massachusetts Congress then would recommend that town raise up companies of Minutemen from the militias who could respond in a short notice. In 1775, the British Army began patrolling around Boston. Militia companies and Minutemen would continue to train and to drill, while the colonists continued to stockpile gunpowder and supplies. On April 19th, 1775, Paul Revere learns that the British Army is preparing a march on Concord to capture those weapons. Um, this is when a man hung two lanterns in a nearby church to alert others. He used the Revere's code: 1 if by land, 2 if by sea. Revere then mounted a horse and raced west to spread the alarm. As a result of the battles of Lexington and Concord, the British counted 73 dead and 174 wounded, while on the other side, Colonials had 49 men dead with 41 men wounded. These battles, as mentioned previously, kicked off the American Revolutionary War. And then finally, the Continental Congress issued the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, and a new nation was formed. For my next section, I want to discuss the historical importance. This site is historically important for many reasons. The events that took place on April 19th, 1775 were a turning point in a long struggle between England and the American colonies. The battles on this particular day also foreshadowed the rebellious actions of the colonies, who in the end would create a new nation. Then on September 21st, 1959, President Dwight Eisenhower signed the congressional bill establishing the Minuteman National Historical Park. This was created to preserve the significant historical sites, structures, and landscapes that were associated with the opening battles of the American Revolution. Next, I want to talk about the economic importance of this historical park. In this area, most of the people were farmers. Farmers, especially in New England, needed a lot of land in order to survive, but they were running out of land, in a sense. For a lot of people here, they wanted economic freedom as well as political freedom. Economic freedom to trade with whoever they wanted and to move further north and west as they pleased. Until this time, the colonies had been allowed to develop with little interference, but England eventually tightened its political control. Many colonists were convinced that their economic prosperity and liberty were at stake. However, the British would not allow further settlement, but the colonies thought that they should be able to take this unoccupied land in the north and west in order to make more farms. For the colonists, they saw this as an opportunity to expand their territory at a cheaper rate rather than staying where they were and trying to seek out a living on an ever narrowing availability of land. Then lastly, I want to discuss a few points as why we should care about this place. People from America and all over the world come to see this site as an example of what citizens can do and see how far they are willing to go in order to fight for their freedom. I also believe the Minuteman Historical Park interprets the colonial struggle for natural rights and freedoms. Lastly, my slide here is just a video that you guys are welcome to check out. It discusses more about the park itself, and then on the final slide lists my citations and sources for this presentation. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you guys enjoyed this presentation on the Minuteman National Historical Park.